Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see some folks here today. I hope everybody has had a great and full day of teaching. My name is Joshua Chard, and I am the Arts Integration Teacher Leadership Fellow for the Maine Department of Education. I'm also the 2024 Maine Teacher of the Year, and I'm a second grade teacher at East End School in Portland, Maine. And I'm happy to see some folks out here for this very introductory webinar on creating maker spaces in your classrooms. And we're going to talk about starting small and slowly building the capacity to have a makerspace in your classroom. I'm just curious about who is on the call today. If anyone would like to unmute and just introduce themselves and let me know where they teach and what grade level they teach, I would love to have the opportunity to get to know who I'm talking to today. Was anyone willing to unmute and let me know who's there?
I can. I'm Claire Harrington. I'm a fifth grade teacher at Greeley in Cumberland.
Welcome, Claire.
Hi, I'm Valerie Sullivan. I'm the elementary school librarian in Sanford, Maine.
Hi, Valerie. Thanks for
Hi,
coming today.
thanks.
Anyone
Is that
else
my
wants?
turn?
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
My name is Susan Philbrook. I'm actually the K-12 French teacher in Vinyl Haven School. So just figuring things out. Just want to hear what you guys have to say.
Okay, well, it's nice to have you here, Susan. It's been a lot of years since I've been out on Vinyl Haven, but it's beautiful out there.
Yes, it is.
Um, Hi,
Hey
Karen.
Joshua. Yeah, this is Karen Scheibels. Zooming in from Portland Schools. I'm the makerspace teacher for pre-K through 5, and I'm just excited to listen in. I'm so thrilled that you are speaking about this topic.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, Karen. This is definitely a very basic and introductory session today. I would love if anyone who's on the call wants to chime in or ask questions or participate in the conversation as I present today. I would welcome that. Let's keep it a little informal. I am recording. This will be posted on my YouTube channel with the Maine Department of Education so people can view it asynchronously. And I'm happy to be the sage on the stage. I do want to let everybody know I'm a fellow, which means that as I approach each topic each month, I'm learning about that topic. I don't purport to be the expert or the sage about what I'm talking about, but that it's something that I have an interest in and a passion for. And so I'm excited to have that opportunity to plant some seeds today. I think that we're going to be at about, it's going to be about 30 minutes today. I mean, my background is I'm a theater maker. That is my artistic background. And so you would think that would mean that I would rehearse, but that is not the case. I prepare, but I don't rehearse. So I think I've prepared a 30-minute presentation today, but we'll see what happens. But please just unmute yourselves and feel free to ask questions and let me know your thinking. And like I said, this is a plant the seeds and start the conversation. I will be linking to a couple of websites throughout the presentation. At the end, my last slide will be a QR code that will actually give you access to the entire slideshow today. And then if you visit the Office of Teaching and Learning's page on the Maine Department of Education website, and you scroll to the bottom, you can find the links to the Teacher Fellows Padlets and everything that I talk about, all of the things that I'm writing about this year and everything that I'm doing webinars about can also be found on my Padlet. So let's jump on in. So let's talk about our learning goals. We're going to start. Our goals today is to one, understand the value of makerspaces. Our target is that when we finish today, participants will be able to articulate ways in which makerspaces enhance creativity, critical thinking, and engagement in the classroom. We'll identify some key components of a makerspace. There are all kinds of approaches to building makerspaces. Some of them are much more formal, and involve packages and sort of expensive materials. I tend to be more of the let's throw some stuff together with some really cool stuff and see what happens. But we'll talk a little bit about that today. Um, you'll be able to describe essential tools and materials and have some organizational strategies needed to set up and maintain a functional makerspace at different grade levels. We'll talk a little bit about some curriculum integration strategies. I think that one of the things that people get hung up on is that they think that a makerspace is extra, that it's something different, that it's something outside of what they're already doing in their classroom. And I want to talk a little bit about how you can use your makerspace to enhance your literacy program, to enhance your world language program, to enhance your science program, to enhance your social studies program, that it really is something that exists in tandem with, not alongside of or separate from what people are already doing in their classrooms. We'll talk a little bit about classroom management techniques. We're just going to touch a little bit on safety protocols, collaborative structures, because I think the other thing that happens is use of maker materials can feel a bit chaotic and can feel a little bit out of control. That chaos is really good if there are structures within which that chaos exists. We want it to be a healthy chaos. We don't want it to be a chaos that feels out of control or uncomfortable. Does anyone have anything to say or questions about those targets for today?
No.
All right, moving on. So, our agenda for today. I'll outline the core value of maker spaces and why they matter. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of setting up a maker space with some budget-friendly tips. I'll also talk a little bit about maybe opportunities for seeking funding to start a maker space. But the truth is, oftentimes the materials that are the most fun in a maker space are the stuff that are recycled materials that other people would look at and think are garbage, and our students can look at and see something beautiful that they can use to create. We'll look at tools and materials suited for different grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school. We'll make some generalizations about what grade levels things are suited for. But in my research, for example, I read a lot of things that said introduce the use of 3D printing in high school, but I've seen 3D printing used very successfully at the elementary school level. And so there might be some generalizations about where we should introduce certain things at certain levels, but you should think about what your comfort level is introducing different kinds of materials at different levels. We'll discuss some practical ways to integrate maker projects into your curriculum, and we'll talk about engagement, classroom management, and assessment strategies, and have a little bit of time for questions and answers, or even an informal conversation. There are only 5 of us on the call, so we certainly can just have a chit chat if we decide we want to do that too. So what is a makerspace? A makerspace in schools, it's kind of a dedicated area where students can explore hands-on project and develop STEAM skills. And they promote creativity, problem solving, and collaboration by providing materials that can include craft supplies. I love having in a maker space, I love to have broken electronics. It's really amazing to pull electronics apart, use those parts to create something else, look at the guts of an old VCR or an old boombox technology that kids find kind of interesting because it's not part of their lives. And if you're ready, having some tools where students can be actually building things using different supplies. One of the things that's really important about a makerspace, in my opinion, is that a makerspace is not something where I have an exemplar and students are trying to recreate my exemplar using the materials that are in front of them. A makerspace is an opportunity to have a problem that we want to solve, and make lots of materials available and allow our students to experience trial and error as they experiment with what the materials can do and what they can make with the materials. It activates deeper thinking. It designs thinking and active engagement in real world challenges. I mean, the truth is that when people come up with inventions and solve problems, they're using the materials that are around them to start making those prototypes and to build their ideas from scratch. And they're a great hub for interdisciplinary learning. They really bridge different subjects through project-based activities. And one of the amazing things about it is that we know that at any given time, the students in front of us are coming from all levels of experience and all levels of learning readiness. One of the amazing things about having materials where students can demonstrate their learning through building things is that it provides access for students where a text-based assessment, a traditional sort of style of assessment, might not actually be able to demonstrate to us what they've actually learned. Whereas if they're allowed to creatively build something and then describe what they have built and how it provides evidence of what they have learned, it is a natural way to differentiate for the variety of learners who are in front of us. And so a makerspace for me, what I'm really talking about today is not a corner of the library, although it can certainly be that, where kids go to once a week. For me, a makerspace is ideally a cart or a shelving unit full of all of these amazing materials that lives right in your teaching space, that allows students easy access to those materials. It's always in their peripheral vision. They're always can be thinking about, I wonder how I could use that. I wonder what I could do with that. Oh, I have an idea for that. A really great anecdote for me is, as I said, I'm a theater maker. And last year I had the opportunity to bring my students to see a production of Knuffle Bunny that I had actually directed. And so there was a lot of connection there we looked at the Mo Willems Knuffle Bunny books. They were super connected to it because I was the director of the show. And we came back after that experience, having attended that show. And without me having said anything, at indoor recess the next day, a group of students who I had never seen play together suddenly decided that they were going to do their own version of Knuffle Bunny and started pulling out materials with permission to build the props and sets for their production of Knuffle Bunny. That was such an amazingly rich learning opportunity and an amazingly rich opportunity for collaboration that happened because there were things in the room available to them that they could create. They had just seen props and sets and costumes modeled on a professional stage, and then they decided that they were going to do their own version of that. And like I said, it was an unexpected combination of students. My favorite they were doing it to surprise me, even though I was on recess duty in the classroom. So there was a lot of whispering and a lot of trying to make sure I didn't see what they were doing. And my favorite quote was one of the students who was very much a take charge student said to another, you know, I think you'd be really good in the role of the washing machine. And instead of being insulted by that, the student was like, cool, I want to be the washing machine. How do I make myself look like a washing machine? How am I going to be a washing machine that things can be put inside of? And this became something that they worked on for weeks. They kept coming back to it. Every time they had a moment, they came back to it. It was a strong literacy connection, and I didn't even plan it. It wasn't even something I had come up with. But because materials were available in the room, and because there is a culture of when you want to do something, when you have some work you want to do, you are welcome to help yourself to the materials. This rich learning experience, this rich collaboration happened that I could never have planned for and never could have expected. So why do it? I mean, we're being inundated all the time with commercial curriculum. This is what you have to be teaching. Here's your pacing guide. What is the value of slowing down and becoming makers? There are a lot of studies that show that hands-on projects increase student motivation and memory retention. We know that the number one predictor of our students' success is if they see relevance in what they're doing and they're motivated to be a part of what's happening in the classroom. And absolutely, there is a place for the pencil and paper work, those kinds of assignments that we are doing with students. But the bottom line is, for a lot of kids, that hook is going to be the opportunity to create and build and explain how they came up with their ideas and why they built it the way they did and why did they choose the materials they chose. And so with student motivation and memory retention, do you think you're going to remember if you're studying the digestive system? Are you going to remember it because of the worksheet you filled out or because you took a bunch of cool recycled materials and you built yourself a model of the digestive system? We talked a little bit earlier about how easily it is to integrate into what you're already doing. So, and that also allows students to see the connections between those disciplines. Oh, the skills I developed building this while we were studying this science concept, those maker skills, those building skills also help me understand math concepts, what we're studying in math, because I'm going to build something that demonstrates what I'm learning about in math. And I think that one of the things that we see our students really struggling with, especially since COVID, is resilience. I see at the beginning of the year when my new second graders come into me, they're very much about getting the right answer and reaching a level of frustration really quickly when they perceive that they have gotten it wrong. When you're engaged in creative building of projects that relate to what you're learning, you're going to fail fast. You're going to think you have a great idea, and what you build is going to fall apart. You're going to have put something beautiful together, and when you come in the next morning, it doesn't look like the way you left it the afternoon before. You learn how to use fasteners, you learn engineering, you learn how to balance pieces that you're trying to piece together to express your thinking. You learn how much glue it takes to hold something together. And because the process naturally has taking risks and making mistakes built right into it, there isn't a stigma attached to the quote unquote failing and having to try it all over again. And because that is a core part of the design process, right? We come up with a plan, we try it, we revise our plan when it doesn't work out the way we do, we revise multiple times. Suddenly, you go into revision on something that you were really motivated about building and really excited about building. And now you understand why, as an author, you need to revise your work multiple times. Suddenly, it doesn't feel like you're insulting my work because you're telling me this is only my first draft and I have to do another draft. Those habits of mind spill over into other things students are doing as they're working in their classrooms. And so for me, I feel like I also, part of my work is with high school level students. And I definitely see among my high school level students that resilience isn't there. And we need to create opportunities to explicitly give students the opportunity to develop grit and to develop that idea that multiple drafts is absolutely the way I want to go. And so again, it feels less formal having this space in your classroom for students to use. But in the end, it's actually a highly structured, incredibly valuable activity for students to be engaged in. And it is absolutely worth taking the time in your classroom to build a community of makers. So, setting up a makerspace. when the idea of makerspaces first came into my a makerspace first came into my school, it was along the idea of we're going to use a corner of the library and there's going to be a bunch of cool stuff there and you can come down when the library is available and you can build with it. And no one used it. And I think that a reason people didn't use it is because they already were feeling anxious about what they needed to accomplish in their day-to-day work as a classroom teacher. All of us are teachers. We know the day-to-day expectations of teachers. Nothing ever gets taken away and things get added constantly. And if it feels like it's just another thing, no one's going to do it. So consider how a student will move about the space so they can collaborate without crowding. For me as a classroom teacher, that means developing systems for distributing, storing, making sure that there's a way for that students can access materials and they know what to do when they get those materials. If there's a bin of materials that they're really interested in using, how do you get those materials? Where can you work with them? What are the expectations when you're done with those materials? And so making sure those instructions are explicit, written down somewhere, and reinforced. That might be on task cards so that they can help themselves and support themselves when you're busy with other students. It can mean practicing, modeling, maybe start with a 1 day. We're going to take some materials and I want you to build something that makes you feel excited. Build a model of in our Wabanaki studies, we study the Presumpscot River watershed. Use some of these materials to build a model of one of the animals that lives and depends upon the Presumpscot River watershed. And think about that kind of thing so that students have explicit practice of using the materials, taking care of the materials, and cleaning up the materials. And listen, it's really fun to have cute things like pom-poms and pipe cleaners and styrofoam balls and other craft supplies. And there's nothing wrong with having those kinds of craft supplies in your makerspace. And we will talk about how I go about getting things funded so that I can have those kinds of materials. And those are great and they're fun and they're motivating. But in some ways, they're also limiting because of an item like a pipe cleaner or a colorful pom-pom kind of tells you through its form how you should use it. But if you have cardboard scraps and wrapping paper tubes and paper towel tubes and toilet paper tubes, so you have tubes of all different sizes, and you have all different size plastic bottles and other containers, all different size plastic containers, along with things like acrylic paints so that that once you put those materials together, you can think about ways that you want to finish them. That's a great place to start. Just put the word out. Basically, you're saying to your community, here's a list of the kind of garbage that I would like to have in my classroom so that we can use it as learning materials and have access to it. And we'll be reaching out again because we know you're going to be generating more of it because we're going to need to keep replacing the materials in our classroom. And so it's really pretty easy. And finally, if you want to purchase some specific consumables, explore your grant opportunities. And look, I know that you're tired and it's really hard. I'm going to tell you the easiest one for me is if your school system allows it. And I know some school systems don't allow people to use this, but Donors Choose, my lifetime on Donors Choose, I just hit $43,000 worth of materials purchased for my classroom since I started using Donors Choose. It's really easy. It guides you through it, and then it's online shopping. And who doesn't love online shopping? And the prompts are there, they're very clear. So that's a place that I would recommend if you haven't already, start with Donors Choose. It is astonishingly accessible. And I have donors from all over the country, and now I have regular donors. I have a woman named Grammy in the Midwest who donates every time I put a proposal up. And so I strong and then look at other ways of possibly fundraising, and maybe your students have some ideas of ways that you could raise some funds. So I'm just going to jump to this website, and I'm not going to read the website to you, but this will be, if you link through my QR code at the end of the presentation, you can hit this. But it's sort of, how am I going to do it? How am I going to put this together? And number one is ask for donations. Put the word out. I'm looking for Play-Doh. I'm looking for clay. I'm looking for dough. I just did some projects using salt dough. I'm pretty sure if you put out the word that you're looking for flour and salt, there are people that are going to go right to their pantries and send that right in with their kids. So ask around who can donate. Look at yard sales or other kinds of cheap places where you have the opportunity to buy things inexpensively. Listen, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit of a dollar, or I guess I would have to say now, the $1.25 store addict. There's a lot of stuff that is motivating and attractive to students that you can pick up there fairly inexpensively. Um, In our area, we have Ruth's Recycling Resources, which students can be members of. It's a recycling center in that corporations donate materials to them, and teachers who belong to member school, who work at member schools, can shop there. It doesn't cost anything to shop there. But see if there's any place in the area that is recycling specific materials that you would like to use. Leverage social media. One of the things that was really a growing experience for me during my year of recognition as Maine Teacher of the Year was I was expected to have a social media presence. And, I'm pretty good at the all, blech, social media is a cesspool. I don't want to be there. But as I've gotten followers and I have people that are actually checking into what I'm posting, it's actually a really pretty amazing tool for putting the word out about your needs and what you're doing. And people get excited about that and will respond to that. And there's Donors Choose. Um, I can't say enough. Um, Everything in my classroom that is cool, attractive, right down to the tables and chairs in my classroom, have all been purchased through Donors Choose. And so think about that. This Carly and Adam website has a lot of great resources, and you'll be able to link that if you use the QR code to grab my slideshow today. I'm just double checking because sometimes I struggle with toggling between screens. Have I gone back to my slideshow?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Susan. So let's talk about the research. What's the research? Why do it? And so we talked about that it increases student motivation and memory retention. It integrates with what you're doing. We talked about the resilience. I think that kids get excited when they have open-ended tasks, when they have the opportunity to plan things from start to finish. They are much more interested in getting their hands into those projects and really digging in. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I have to have my students work in a lot of workbooks in my classroom. And that's been an adjustment for me because that's not how I was trained as a teacher. it's still incumbent upon me to find ways to create these hands-on experiences. And so I need to look into the curriculums that have been provided to me and find ways to make it hands-on. And having that makerspace in your room is really great. Oops, there we go. So, um, obviously, kids who are at different developmental levels, you're going to want to think about having different kinds of materials. Although I will say, if it's on the elementary school list, there's no reason not to have those kinds of things in a high school space as well, right? And as we get to the materials that I'm talking about for a high school space, now we're starting to talk about real money. But for elementary schools, think bright, colorful, and simple. Um, Kids will get really excited about a big bin of colorful stuff that isn't it's not their normal materials. As I said before, I'm crazy about using the components from non-working electronics to explore how electronics work and to learn circuitry in a way that isn't formal and doesn't involve a teacher-led activity. I've watched kids take apart broken electronics and then use batteries to get the parts of those electronics moving and doing things, the discrete parts that they have pulled off. But also, the stuff inside of electronics looks really cool. Like, it's really exciting to use those kinds of materials to build into something else. Then in middle school, you might want to introduce some more textiles and clay, maybe some programmable boards, maybe some soldering kits. Maybe think about, as kids get older, having things like glue guns in your makerspace, obviously with careful supervision, because even I tend to glue my fingers together and burn myself with the glue gun a lot. But there's something exciting about using hot glue as opposed to a liquid glue, because man, does that hold things together well. And it's like instant gratification that you had this picture in your mind and you glue it together with some hot glue, and suddenly you're already seeing your ideas come to life and come to fruition. I've included 3D printing at all of the levels. Sorry about that. Because I think that it's accessible at all levels. I think it looks different in elementary school than it looks in the upper levels. And then in high school, I think that if you have the ability to get some funding, you have the opportunity for students to use more advanced equipment to create their own experiments. I love the idea of students doing a Shark Tank kind of product pitch, and building their prototype. But this is when you have to really start talking about safety guidelines and making sure that they are well trained. But you also want to make sure you give them that autonomy and allow them to have deeper dives into using the technology, and to also have that opportunity to, as they use the technology, to not always be successful at it and not to always bail them out when they get stuck. So again, I'm going to just hop on a link here, and this website, and I'm not going to read it to you because you can look at it on your own later, has a lot of great ideas for how to build your makerspace. And I will also tell you that if you go to my Padlet, which you can link through the Office of Teaching and Learning, every website that I use in a different webinar, also is on the Padlet with a description of what you can find on that website. So I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it yourself. But there are lots of amazing resources out there. I've tried to curate a few that feel more robust to me so that you don't have to do the work of going through 8 pages of Google results. But know that there are lots of opportunities out there. And so I found this checklist. I really loved this checklist. I thought it was a great way to get you started. 114 tips to create a STEAM makerspace. And as I look at some of the things on this list, yarn, embroidery string, cardboard, fabric and textile swatches, telephone wire, balloons, popsicle sticks, pipe cleaners. I mean, I think, Karen, I look at a lot of these materials and they remind me of things that we actually have in our Amplify kits in Portland, that we give to kids to use to explore scientific concepts without us telling them the answer of how to do it.
Yes.
I think that that's really cool.
I would
What,
encourage folks to dig into some schools will have old kits. I'm thinking like Boss kits, things like that, that may be in a closet, maybe things that were purchased during COVID. I mean, there's just, these closets get stacked with materials. Obviously, don't take anything you haven't checked around, but there may be stuff you can go in and hack and like we took a lot of Boss kits apart and found gems hidden in them.
Karen, I think that's a really good point. A lot of our schools have closets. I think about the storage closet at East End. There are boxes and boxes of stuff left behind by teachers who have retired. And instead of sitting in a storeroom, let's go through those boxes and get that stuff either into kids' hands or into a recycling facility or to into the garbage if it isn't useful. But I think that you're hard pressed to not find some use for students to engage with creative making in almost anything you could find in those boxes. And so again, this checklist, I'm not going to read it to you. You all know how to read, but on my last slide, hit up that QR code and then you'll have my slideshow and you can hit up the links. So let's talk about engagement, classroom management, and differentiation. Full disclosure, I just learned how to make a slide like this where I have parts of the slide fade in. So let's see if it works the way I anticipate it will. And let's see, it does not. It is not working the way I anticipated it. So how about I go to my notes and talk about the points that are supposed to be on here. Let me try escape. All right, well, I'm going to leave the slide up like that, and then I'll go back into presenter view. Let's start with, I keep hitting on this same exact thing over and over again, that engagement and ownership. It lets students pick projects that interest them or offer a menu of choices tied to your learning goals. When students have choice, they are more motivated and more invested. When students have choice, they will go back to that work over and over again because they won't perceive it as work. They will perceive it as fun. They will perceive it as recreational. Really establish the responsibility for maintaining and taking care of your makerspace materials and have jobs related to it. Is there a materials manager? Is there a safety supervisor? That gives students leadership opportunities. Kids love to be in charge of other kids. They love to be the bosses. And so do it. Let's empower kids to take care of it yourself. Don't make it extra work that you have to clean up at the end of the day. This doesn't work unless students are absolutely 100% in ownership of maintaining and caring for those materials. For your classroom management, this is kind of a duh. This is exactly the same that you would do with anything. Set clear expectations and guidelines, especially regarding time, tool usage, and cleanup procedures. It goes back to that first 6 weeks of school that we practice everything. How do you sharpen a pencil? How do you take care of the markers? This is no different. But you can't assume that your students are going to be motivated or interested in taking care of them, or actually know where to begin when it comes to taking care of stuff. Think about small groups or pairs for maker projects. It's one, because you can provide more targeted support and circulate more easily. But the other is that if students are working together on creating a project, that is encouraging. That's a structured way to encourage student discourse. You can practice the talk moves that you use in your classroom as they work together. Then you can have different partnerships pair up, share what they're doing, talk about it, do that whole talk move where, can you tell me what Susan said about her project? Who can describe Susan's project to me? What did Susan say about that project? And makerspaces naturally accommodate different learning styles. They offer multiple ways to demonstrate understanding, build a model, code a program, create an artistic representation. Listen, I was a kid that did really poorly on tests. And it wasn't because I wasn't a smart, capable kid. But man, if I got to write a script and put on a play to show my learning, I can promise you that not only thank you. Yes, Karen. Multilingual students to shine. Absolutely. Um, I can promise you that not only did I retain that information more effectively, but I also really loved being in school to do it because it was making theater is something that I've always been able to do. It's something that I've always loved. It's something that has always been a passion of mine from a very young age. I wasn't afforded many opportunities to do that, to build costumes and props and convey my learning through um, that preferred method of expressing myself. I'm gonna take a breath and say, does anyone want to unmute and talk about any impressions they have, any questions, comments about what I've been talking about this afternoon?
Joshua, I would just say, having been in so many elementary classrooms, I know some folks may be feeling like they don't have the physical space within their room to have all these different things. So it's okay to start small. I'm picturing one of those tiered, three-tiered carts on wheels that you find at Michael's or, secondhand. And you've got some things on that, and that rolls out when it's time and then it rolls back away. So even if it's just a small step, I think that that's a great way to start. And then as you personally, feel comfortable, then you can begin to find ways to expand it. So yeah, I would just say don't be afraid to start.
I agree with you. And I think that starting small for anything new is actually best practice, right? It's also best for our kids. It's overwhelming if you try to start large. Karen, I would also add that eventually your students can get used to moving furniture out of the way and quickly restoring the room to its regular learning condition. So if you're working on projects that require a lot of space, if you don't have tables, thinking about organizing the desks in your room in a way that create larger workspaces, that kids are pretty adaptive and will quickly get, and actually younger students in particular will really get excited about moving all the tables and chairs to the side and then on a teacher's go putting the room back together so it looks like we never moved the furniture. And so I think that that's another way. But storage, of course, in classrooms is always a challenge and an issue. So that was my quick pitch.
Josh,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I always love it, and maybe you have it in some of these links. Can you give one or two really specific examples of like setup that you said to sort of demonstrate learning
Can you be a
in the
little more,
makerspace?
tell me more about Are you asking about the physical setup of the makerspace
Oh,
or how you
so
model it for students?
so, and maybe I'm missing some of this. One of my concerns, I don't know if that's the right word, is I don't want it just to be a free for all, build whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you had said demonstrate learning about things. So I guess I'm just wondering what a couple of examples in, say, second grade, because I think you said you taught second grade,
Sure.
that you set up a system, you set up a task, if you will, like demonstrate whatever it is. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking for sort of more concrete examples of how you've set some things up. Does that make sense?
Sure. So I would start with by looking at what are your what are your typical outcomes for a unit that you're teaching? So I'm going to go back to the Wabanaki Studies unit because to the Wabanaki Studies in Portland Public Schools because that's a really robust homegrown curriculum that feels super teacher centered. Um, so there, as in second grade, we well, it is changing now. I actually haven't looked at the new curriculum. But last year I was teaching third grade, and we really did a deep dive into the Presumpscot River watershed and the relationship that the Wabanaki people have and continue to have with the river, and um, how the how European settlement, how Europeans coming in impacted that. And so one of the things that I would have possibly have students do is think about how can you build what is a watershed? Because we talk a lot about it being a watershed that empties into Casco Bay, which I actually can see out of my classroom window. What does that mean to be a watershed? And can you build a model of a watershed? How would you demonstrate what a watershed is? How would you demonstrate elevations and how water travels through a watershed? And here are some materials that you could do that with. And it's going to seem scary. And for kids who haven't, like I said, if you start with smaller 1 day kinds of projects so that they get used to the idea of, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, I'm not going to give you all the answers, they'll be ready to tackle something larger like that. I also could definitely see when you're studying um, geometry concepts, using materials in your makerspace to build the shapes and the angles that you're talking about. I'm teaching number lines right now. Are there objects in our materials that we could use to build a number line? Would you use some materials and would you also access some math materials to used for measurement and for spacing things out. Um, and and then a big thing is in literacy, can you when we're studying themes, literary elements, are there ways that you can demonstrate what you have, like if you're talking about the main characters in a book and you've been digging into the description of those main characters, how can you demonstrate that you know about what you know about those main characters from those descriptions by building something that is reflective of those characters? And I'm not necessarily talking about a model of the character. What are some things that you could build and put together or collage or create that demonstrate that you understand who this person is as a character? Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, concrete examples help me a lot more when I get stuck and get mired down in all the building space. Because most of the time when I see makerspace, it's when we've used it, it's more like a global school play day activity, or it's sort of an earned
Absolutely.
privilege kind of thing. And I would love to have the luxury to do that all the time, but I just don't. So that's
So
why
Claire, what I would say is start by having I would even go simpler than what Karen suggested to start with. I would start with having a great big plastic tote and for lack of a better word, throw a bunch of crap in it and bring that tote out and say, we're going to use the materials from this tote. I mean, I think for me, my goal through my year of working for the department as the arts integration teacher leader is I want us to move away from arts activities, and I consider being a maker an arts activity. Um, I want to move away from arts activities being discrete and siloed activities. Now we go to art class. This is when we make art. Now we go to music class. This is where we learn about and make music. What I want is I want to see it infused throughout a student's day. And you don't have to be a scientist or an artist to successfully integrate being a maker into your classroom. Um, in in a couple of months, I'll be getting together. I'll be doing a panel discussion with music teachers from across the country. And we're going to do for Music in Our Schools Month, we're going to talk about music in the classroom for non-musicians. So that's what I really want us to, I really want to develop a mindset that our children's days should be infused with these kinds of activities, and they shouldn't be separate or extra. They should just be a part of the routines and what they're doing every day. And
Great, thank
also,
you.
you're welcome. And I would remind you that I'm not an expert on this. I am, you're not going to come to my school and see my amazing makerspace in my classroom. I have spent the last month researching and learning and thinking about this and taking what I already knew about makerspaces and expanding my knowledge of it. Now I have to start doing the work that I'm encouraging you to do in my own classroom.
Josh,
Anyone
you
else
also have to
want to
be a
throw?
good teacher and not belittle yourself. You know a heck of a lot more than me. You can earn the title of expert if you'd like to on this one. We
I'll work
always
toward
talk
it.
ourselves down, but we do a lot of amazing things. So
Oh,
I'm give
believe
you
me, I'm not
take
knocking
credit for
myself
that.
down. I actually I have a pretty healthy self-esteem. Um, but but I do want to also be humble in these presentations and say, um, I have dug into this and researched it and learned about it so that I can present it to you. This is not necessarily something that I have 100% integrated into my practice. Anyone else want to throw anything out there before we go start making dinner? All right. Well, I'm going to let you know that my next presentation next month will be on February 5th. It will be with the artistic staff of the Children's Theater of Maine, which is the oldest continually operating professional children's theater in the United States. It happens to be a place where I also get to go be a maker um, as part of my side gig of being a theater maker. And we will be talking about integrating theater into your classroom practices and why it's also important to bring students out to see theater. And you heard a little taste of that when I talked about what happened for my students after they saw Knuffle Bunny at the Children's Theater. So check that out. I appreciate you all coming out after a long day of work. And I've enjoyed giving you this little taste. I just want to point people toward the chat. Karen has put a link in there if you want to hit that link before I close the Zoom so you have it. Um, Karen suggested look for problems and stories that you read with your students. They're great launching points. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. Karen will know why. I was at a school board meeting until 12:40 a.m. today, and I was like, oh, maybe no one will show up and I can record this later. But I'm actually really glad you showed up. I had a lot of fun chatting with all of you and getting to hang out with you a little bit this afternoon.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you.
And this QR
Thank
code will
you.
take you to my slideshow, and this presentation within the next week will be up on my Padlet. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.